Okay, hey, we're doing to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today, a very special prototype preview for you guys from the brand Traska. A little bit about them. They're headquartered out of Jacksonville Beach, Florida, founded by John Mack. And he basically built this brand with the intention of making a watch that you could wear without worrying about. A true tool watch to fit any activity. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this would be kind of within that everyday watch space. Some key characteristics and design what you're looking for a watch you can wear every day. Of course, you're just going to really want that versatile blend of sporty and dressy attributes. This is their Summiteer 4th generation in a charcoal black dial, and this is a prototype. So in terms of the serial number on the back, it's just all X's. But the Summiteer formula remains the same. It's described as a refined blend of timeless designs and modernity. The Summiteer brings the classic field watch into the 21st century, combining a vintage aesthetic with contemporary engineering. This formidable traveling companion is resistant to water, scratches, and shocks. This goes for $615 direct, and it is coming soon, the summer of 2023. This is, again, a little bit before, of course, the production models are ready and done and delivered, but I did want to, of course, follow up with you guys and show you this piece because I mean, I've always been very impressed with what John's been doing with the brand Traska as a whole, and I think the Summiteer is really it hits such a sweet spot. And I do actually have an original Summiteer here that I will be able to kind of put side by side so I can highlight some of those key updates. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. So as you can see, definitely has that Explorer inspired look in terms of the 369 and then the large triangle at 12. Now, some of you might be writing this watch off just because of that feature set, but I will tell you this is so much more than just an Explorer homage. And if it is an Explorer homage, it's probably one of the best there is out there because it actually does pay respects to it without actually copying any particular feature sets directly, which I think is really the truest form an homage because it pays respect to a design. It's not a clone. It's not simply made to be an affordable alternative. This is meant, this has its own mission statement. It's its own watch from a brand that also does stand on its own with various models. Now, some of the details here, you're getting 38.5 millimeters in diameter, 10.6 millimeters thick, including that crystal there. Also, it's going to be 45.7 millimeters lug to lug. It's made out of full 316L stainless steel with a really great scratch resistant hard coating, which is basically like a DLC coating that adds another 1,000 hardness Vickers, which is pretty crazy considering that regular steel is going to typically be, or I should say regular 316 stainless steel is going to be around 200 hardness Vickers. So this is going to be a lot harder. And I will say that they really have improved the formula because if you compare it to the older model, it has noticeably a darker tint to it. I don't know if it's going to show up as well on the camera, but I think it still looks great. But by comparison, this almost gives me a bit of a titanium tint to it because it is just a darker tone in terms of the levels there. Of course, this is the blue dial versus the charcoal black, but also we'll point out some other differences as we move on. One of them being this great crystal. My goodness, it's a beautiful double dome, box dome sapphire with inner AR coating, and it's gorgeous, guys. Also, you do have a beautifully signed crown, which is detailed very nicely. And again, it's come a long way. So this is not some off-the-shelf type of watch where they just come out and they say, hey, look, I'm just going to copy the Explorer. There's been various, this 4th generation in terms of the iterations of this piece and refinements. Look at how far just the crown has come, right? I mean, it's just a big difference. Look at the lugs. Look at the sides of the case. It went from a very simple side brushed there with a nice high polish to now beautifully beveled, but then also having a full high polished side there that is also contoured. Also, you look at the bezels themselves, One has a very simple kind of circular brushing. The other one has more of the complex radial brush there, as you can see, that goes all the way around the outside, which is quite handsome as well. Also, hey, early model had display case back, new model solid case back. Really capitalizing on the thinness, but then with that extra thinness, it affords you a little bit of play to add such a gorgeous crystal, which I think is worth the visual weight, considering. And you can even look at these side by side. Visually, it's very, very thin. Look at how much that case back insets into the mid case versus here that case back does protrude, and then you're also getting more protrusion on the bezel versus now how much slimmer and tighter the bezel is. Also, these are, this is a really nice bracelet, 3-link, right? It actually is 3 links, which is nice. It's not just carved up single link to look like 3, but now you have fully articulated links there, so these can all fold up on top of themselves if you really wanted to, which means it's going to be supremely comfortable while on the wrist, and actually even more easy to get on and off the wrist. Then we get into the clasp here, guys. Again, if somebody came out with this watch today as it sits, it would be an impressive watch. It's very nice. And, I really, when it first came out, I likened it a lot to the Tudor Ranger, just at a better size range at that 38. But you look at the clasp, and again, this was probably my only feedback in terms of requests that I think could have been better, is you have a very standard kind of thin button there versus now nicely milled, right? And this was, generally more brushed, more no nonsense. And now you have something that definitely is it's pulling a lot more tricks there to show you, still beautifully done. You got a little perlage there on the folding mechanism, all milled. Very nice manual micro adjustment holes there. Would it be nice to have something with toolless micro adjust? Sure. But what's even better than toolless micro adjust is micro adjusts that work, right? And this is absolutely going to work. You're going to be able to dial in the right fit for you. And I would much rather have that versus something that feels experimental or unfinished, or adds, a large amount of bulk, which you can see. That's one of the beauty things that's been carried over, is the silhouette is really gorgeous, which makes it fantastic to wear. So I did want to just kind of have that side by side so you guys could kind of appreciate how far this watch has come. Even looking at the end links there, before it was just kind of engraved on that end link, and now you can see it has the 3D lift there, which is very nice. So it just flows even better. The quality is really, really impressive, guys. Even the way the brushing goes, now the brushing matches actually the brushing on the end link versus before. The brushing that was on the case, you can see it was going a different direction. And again, very simple, very no nonsense, and a beautiful watch. Like, again, I didn't have a ton of critiques for this watch when it was first released way back when. But now this watch, it just hits and delivers so much more. And I think that's probably the thing that it has the most in common with the Rolex Explorer, is that it just over delivers. Oh, I forgot to mention one of the coolest features. So printed dial, very flat, but it does have that nice contour. So it does have some 3-dimensionality to it, right? With that inner circular section that's kind of inset, and then the outer track that is raised. Now you still have that feature, but now instead of it being purely printed, those indices are actually full 3D applied markers, guys. So you can see there's some depth to it. So they're doing something very, very cool. And it's those little touches that I really, really can appreciate, because yes, it wants to be simple. It wants to, still have that appeal of that toughness, but they also wanted to do things that were hard and complex, and they wanted to deliver on that to show you guys what they're capable of, right? What their prowess is. And they just have overbuilt this watch in so many ways, right? It's not just about the fact that it has more water resistance than it needs with a screw down crown, etc. It's also the fact that it's finished to a level that, wow, I mean, it really impresses, especially under $1,000. I mean, 615 is just extremely nice for considering the finish on here. I mean, there are watches, not even mainstream. I mean, I'm talking micro brand, high bang per buck, really impressive watches that are out there that this is creeping up on, and all those watches are well over $1,000, and this one is well under. It's only barely, over half of 1,000, right? It's only $100 more than $500. So I mean, it's definitely very, very impressive. But let's get back into some more of these details. So we already mentioned the beautifully signed crown, that nice radial brushing there on the sunburst of the effect on that nicely fixed bezel with that high polished bevel as well. Then we get over to the case back, which is solid and etched and really nicely flat, guys. Again, so really listening to the feedback from the consumers. Hey, the movement in there isn't super luxurious to look at. It's just a Miyota 9039, but it does have, of course, that higher hertz beat rate, which is great. 4 hertz sweep, which is 8 ticks per second versus the typical 3 hertz or 6 ticks that you might get from something like a Seiko movement. Also, this is a no date specific movement, so you're not going to have a ghosted crown position, which is also nice. Now, circling back to this dial, nice matte black contoured dial, 3D applied indices, polished hands. You're seeing super luminova there, BGW9 Lume, so it's going to have a nice blue glow, but it's going to render as visually white during daylight. And of course, 20 millimeter lugs, which do make it a real strap monster potentially. But this bracelet is so good, who knows if anyone's going to take it off of this. But I think this will look amazing on a textile strap like a NATO or something like that, or even various leather or rubber strap options. But the bracelet itself is really nicely done, solid. Again, the fitment on the end link is very nice. Even seeing the matching brushing there is just another extra step. The nice range in terms of the links are actually quite short, so you don't even need half links because they're already kind of a shorter length, which make this really articulate and fit really wonderfully, versus the other model originally had longer, more standard looking links, which makes you think like, okay, like maybe you could use a half link here or there, and to really take advantage, but you still do have, of course, those micro adjust spaces. Here, you don't really need half links when the actual regular links are this short, and then you still do have, of course, all the room there in terms of being able to manually punch the spring bar over and scoot that back and forth as your wrist might permit. So really beautiful. And then of course I'm really impressed with how much nicer the clasp is. Look how beautiful that bevel is. Not that it wasn't before, but now you get that nice punch. Look at this material here, beautifully done. Look at the brushing. It just stands out. It's so much more vibrant on those push buttons now that they're milled. You get the double post security there. Very, very nice. Again, everything feels really nice in terms of its construction, and then it's also finished very, very handsomely. So, it is a looker. But let's go ahead, get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, this wears absolutely perfectly. It's just the right size for a watch of this type. It's not oversized, not undersized. It just really hits, again, that sweet spot. But if I do bring my wrist a little bit too close to the camera, you're going to see some lens distortion. It might make the watch appear a little bit larger than it actually is. So what I'll do is go ahead and keep my wrist down low and just tighten the shot up here so we can still get a detailed look while still keeping a very true aspect ratio of the watch and how it actually lays on the wrist. You can see it is very nicely centered. You can see either end there, and wow, this thing's gorgeous. Check out the way that it rides. Just lays on the wrist. A nice organic curvature. Again, I wasn't disappointed by at all by the previous, more slab sided, especially considering how thin it was. But then when you start adding in this additional craftsmanship, that's not easy, guys, to get those beautiful molded contours there, that high polished shine, that glossiness. It's just really sets a very nice contrast against that nice brushing there, which is really well done. And then the dial, again, now as much as they've turned up the outer portions of the case and the bracelet, now the dial even has more depth and dimension to it as well. And it's still matted, but it's not like a grainy matte tone. So it's kind of a nice sweet spot there as well in terms of it rendering nice and black without being too reflective. And let's say if they had done a glossy dial. So it still has that nice toolish aesthetic there, nice and rough and tough, but still so it has that confidence inspiring look. But again, they turned it up so high in terms of the refinements. It just, again, over delivers on a really simple promise of a watch that's going to be just very versatile for everyday wear. Something that is that older formula, but just improved in so many ways. So with that said, let's actually get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots of light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh yes, as you can see, really outstanding Lume. Again, it's something where it really, before it was thickly applied, but now it's just kind of next level in terms of the application. And yes, it's BGW9, it's not C3, so it's not going to necessarily have that initial punchiness in terms of the Lume. But now with all of the extra Lume that's applied, you're going to definitely have more longevity. And again, this is also still a prototype, so it won't be as sharp or as well applied. So if you see any inconsistencies, let's say on the handset or the Lume, just know that, of course, again, this is pre-production, so they'll have all those kinks worked out, of course. And I definitely trust that, considering I've had quite a few Traskas come through the channel, and I do own a few, so I know that they are very big also on quality. So one thing I always like to work in, of course, is low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. Sometimes you're going to be coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, maybe hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, finishes, and textures render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include some harsh lighting that would typically kind of expose any type of production defects. But you're going to see here is just the light gliding uniformly over that beautiful brushing. I won't say the brushing is, quite luxury level brushing there, not quite the hairline brush, but it is definitely nicer than your standard kind of functional brushing there. So it's approaching that luxury like status without actually quite being there. But you know what? It's nowhere near approaching the price or the cost. And some of you might actually appreciate the fact that it does have, a bit more of an industrial brush there, because it just makes the rest of the watch, the way it catches the light, is just really fantastic. Also has that beautiful hard coating on there that is a lot less noticeable, which is great. So it's going to keep this brushing very pristine. Another thing. And look at that dial, guys. Again, it's not, because it's not super glossy, it's not going to have any weird reflections. And then even if you get the direct reflection there, all it does is make it probably even more legible. And you also do get to appreciate the 3D nature of the dial with that inset circular section there at the center going to the raised section. Again, it just adds so much more depth, so much more dimension. And this thing is just, impressive. Cut out all the oohs and the ahs from how much I've enjoyed this piece, and you probably have a much shorter video, but hey, I can't help it. If I'm feeling something, I'm absolutely feeling. I even had to bust out the the gloves there, just because I didn't want to constantly be wiping it off, because I did want to make sure to showcase just how well finished this watch is. So for me, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist: really perfect proportions, very comfortable and balanced wear. That hard coating is less noticeable, which is a very nice improvement over those previous generations. And when I say noticeable, I mean noticeable visually. I'm sure it's equally as strong. I even did before scratch testing from their previous iterations. So you guys know that, it definitely actually does the job. It's not just a marketing gimmick, which I like. So in terms of model variations, this is of course the charcoal black as seen. There's also a sage green, midnight blue, and a sandstone yellow dial option. Also, this is just for the 38 millimeter models, technically 38 and a half, but you can actually get this in the 36 millimeter as well. So you can get those variations. So if you have a smaller wrist, you can absolutely hit an even sweeter spot for you. For me, 7.5-inch wrist, this wears perfectly. I wouldn't go any smaller. I wouldn't go any larger. That 38.5 is very nice. If I had to, I would definitely entertain a 39, but I'm not asking them to increase the size. I just wouldn't be mad at it if they wanted to have a little bit more space and variation in terms of selling these. Now, in terms of comparable models, yeah, I mean, again, I mentioned kind of the Tudor Ranger, especially since it's been redone, but this is at a much better scale with much nicer proportions. Also kind of Black Bay 36. It has a kind of a couple of those more refined, maybe shoulders, and it just has a bit of that magic as well. And then also, of course, my Monta Triumph, just a mainstay of just kind of beautiful independent Swiss watchmaking. It's a model that really changed their whole brand, and I was just very fortunate to buy one of the first few runs of it. I think mine is like serial number 50, and I will always have that watch. And it's it's even evolved into newer models like the Noble. So this again is doing this at a much smaller scale, of course, but I would say it's comparable to those types of watches. So if you're looking at something like a Tudor Ranger as your dream, your grail, Black Bay 36, Monta Triumph, but maybe you're just never wanting to spend that much money on a watch you want to wear every day and maybe give it a good beating from time to time, this could really be a nice sweet spot, because it is affordable enough to where, I mean, it's not super available. These are made in small batches, so if you miss the boat on it, it's going to be tough to get another one. But in terms of the actual ultimate cost, they are, quite attainable still. So I would say if you're watching this video and you like what you see, definitely reach out to the brand, follow their pages, sign up for their newsletters and everything, and see if you can get an allocation, just because this thing's awesome. So bottom line, guys, John and Traska have refined the Summiteer from this kind of no-nonsense everyday field watch into a luxury-like adventure piece. I think that can equally impress whether out on the summit or, back at your local headquarters. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.